Hello, I'm Tia Coatley with the Center for Neighborhoods, and I'm here to discuss the Preston and Finzer Street project with two lovely ladies from the Community Foundation of Louisville. Ladies, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yes.
Sure. I'm Jennifer Fust Rutherford, and I'm the Director of Gift Planning at the Community Foundation.
And I am Ramona Dallum Lindsay. I'm one of the senior program officers at the Community Foundation of Louisville. And I am also the community engagement liaison for the Smoketown community. So I've been working with the Smoketown community for several years, looking at the property on the corner of Preston and Finzer Street that was donated by a Community Foundation of Louisville donor for a community benefit. So the donor wanted to make sure that this land was used in a way that would benefit Smoketown into perpetuity for a long time. That land used to formerly was the Hilrick and Bradsby baseball plant where they make the Louisville Slugger baseball bats. And Tia, I want to add to that too, that our process right now is really a 2-3 step process. The first step in the process is to find out from the Smoketown residents if they would like, what they would like to see done with the property at the corner of Preston and Finzer Street. And the two options that the Community Foundation has proposed are the option that we're talking about now is to sell the property and put the proceeds into a donor advised fund where the advisors help to grant out dollars to nonprofits serving Smoketown. That's the first option. The second option is to do a request for proposals where nonprofit organizations actually say, we would like that land to do X, Y, and Z with. And then the Community Foundation of Louisville will actually grant that land to the nonprofit, and the nonprofit would be responsible for developing that land and carrying out the proposal. So that means the nonprofit would have to do all the fundraising, all the development plans, everything. But it would be their responsibility. So the first step is to find out which of those two options Smoketown residents think would be of greatest benefit for them. Once we determine that, then we will go to the second step of looking at how do we implement those two proposals. And we've been working closely with Center for Neighborhoods to help lead the process of hearing the voice of the Smoketown community members. So that's why we are so glad to have Center for Neighborhoods as one of our partners, because we know you all are passionate about hearing community voice and supporting community leaders.
We absolutely are. Jennifer, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, I was just going to say, Ramona had mentioned a little bit ago that what we're trying to do is involve everyone who would be affected by the fund, and that we've come up with two different options for what to do in this situation, and we'll continue to talk with the Smoketown residents. And that really just goes back to what the Community Foundation is. We are a vehicle for people to accomplish the philanthropic goals that they want to accomplish. So our role is to help them do that however we can. And we are always in consultation and in conversation with our donors to see how we can help them do what they want to do. And that's what we want to do in this situation also.
All right, first question. What is a community foundation, and how does the Community Foundation of Louisville help improve the lives of people in the community?
Well, a community foundation is a nonprofit organization that's really a collection of charitable funds created by civic-minded people who want to support and improve the quality of life in our community. Some people do that by creating their own fund at the Community Foundation, and others contribute to a pooled fund that's dedicated to a particular purpose or purposes. The funds then make grants to nonprofits that address the needs of the community. We have over 1,800 individual component funds at the Community Foundation of Louisville. And since 1984, they have distributed over $1 billion to charitable organizations.
Excellent. Thank you. Right, so could you tell me what is a donor advised or community advised fund?
A donor advised fund is a charitable giving fund. It is a separate component fund that's established at a publicly supported nonprofit like the Community Foundation of Louisville. Donors can make their gift into the fund. They receive an immediate tax deduction, and then they or an advisory committee that they've chosen can make recommendations for grants out of that fund to nonprofits that they choose at any time afterwards. There's technically not a community advised fund, but community members could form the advisory committee for a fund, which is what we're envisioning for this fund.
And I think it's interesting that there isn't, right now, there's no such thing as a community advised fund, but Community Foundation of Louisville is wanting to partner with the Smoketown community to look at options for ways that we can use the land at Preston and Finzer Street, which was donated by a Community Foundation of Louisville donor to the community to use for a community purpose. So we're trying to think creatively about how we can use that land donation in a way that can benefit the community. And I think this community advised fund could be one way to redirect the proceeds from a land sale to help the community into forever if it was set up that way, I think.
Exactly.
Someone asked me, Ramona, why is CFL even considering a donor advised fund with community members advising it? And one of the reasons is because I suggested it. And the reason I suggested it is because I started to think about families who have donor advised funds, and they have the family members come together as a group at some designated point, maybe once or twice a year, and they decide as a family how they want to make their charitable contributions. And I thought about Smoketown as being a collection of families, and Smoketown may not have as much generational wealth as some of the families at Community Foundation of Louisville who have already established donor advised funds. So how could we use the land at Preston and Finzer Street to begin to create generational wealth where many Smoketown families could come together and make decisions about charitable contributions in the community, and also over time be able to help grow a potential fund that was seeded by the sale of that property. So I just wanted to bring that up, that's what I was thinking about when I made the suggestion that we look at how do we create a donor advised fund that's advised by a Smoketown community of families, our individuals.
That's a great point, and they are very analogous. And what we have found with families that may have 1 or 2 or even 3 generations that are serving on that advisory committee is they can use that fund as an event that knits them together. Lots of times they'll have maybe a meeting when all the kids come home from college at Christmas, or maybe they do it at Thanksgiving, or they have a summer picnic. And this is the meeting at which everybody, even the grandkids, will bring their proposal for where they would like to see some of the grant dollars go. They bring that to the family and they talk about it, and they talk about why they think this organization is going to do what they think it's going to do, why they think it's worthy. And then they decide together where they are going to send their charitable dollars. And it really ends up being a way for one generation to teach philanthropic values to another generation. And that's how a lot of families use these funds. It teaches people to consider what it is that they would like to support in the community, and then consider who is doing the work that accomplishes those goals, and how can we help them. And it really does knit the group together, and that would be a great function for the Smoketown neighborhood as well.
So let's talk about the fund a little bit. Now, how long does this fund last and who actually determines it?
So we would refer to that as a spending policy, and that's one of the decisions that the Smoketown group would make when they are creating this fund. The spending policy determines how long the fund would be around because it decides how quickly the funds will be used for charitable purposes. One of the options is a permanent endowment. It's something that community foundations are known for managing, are permanently endowed funds. These funds are designed to last for generations. They are invested for growth, and they provide 5% of the fund balance each year for grants to different nonprofits and for the administrative fee for the community foundation. That means that just a certain percentage of the fund is available each year to accomplish charitable goals, and then a certain percentage of the growth each year is reinvested in the fund so that the fund continues to grow and keeps up with inflation as well. A second spending option is a flexible spending option. And what that does is it leaves a portion of the fund balance permanently endowed. So that would be the floor. Below that floor, everything stays permanently endowed. So there will always be something to grow and provide resources for charitable purposes. And above that floor, everything is available to be granted out for charitable purposes to a nonprofit at any time the advisory group chooses. And finally, there's a pass-through fund, and a pass-through fund makes the entire fund balance available at any time for charitable purposes. This would be the type of fund that if there's perhaps a capital campaign of some sort that a group would like to support, they may choose to let the fund balance grow for a number of years and then make a large grant of the entire balance out at one time to support a large project. So these are the types of the decisions that the group is going to need to make when they create the fund. One word, I know that there's been some interest from the Smoketown group about whether they can include this fund in their will or in their estate plan. And if the group decides that it's going to be a permanently endowed fund, a fund that's going to be around in perpetuity, then yes, it can absolutely be included in people's estate plans. Now, if it's going to be a fund that may be exhausted in a shorter period of time by design, then that's not something that would want to be included in your estate plan or in your will.
So that means that if the Smoketown community decided to do a permanently endowed fund, that means they use the proceeds from the sale of the land to start an endowed fund, that money would almost be like a seed that would begin to grow, and that people in the community, if they wanted to, upon their death, they said, I wanted to leave all of my assets to the Smoketown fund, then that would help grow the fund so the community could make more charitable contributions in the future.
Absolutely, yes. So the idea with an endowment is that the principal, the corpus of the fund, continues to grow. And of course, we have to put a footnote on it that says that it is tied to market performance to some extent, to varying degrees of impact based on what the investment option chosen is. But the idea is that the fund would continue to grow, and as the corpus grows, the percentage that's available each year would also increase. So it's a great way to grow the fund by including it in your estate plan.
But one of the other options you mentioned was the spend down option. So with that option, if let's say $1 million was the amount of the proceeds, then you spend the entire $1 million, and when that whole $1 million is gone, then that fund is closed. Is that
exactly
the difference?
Exactly. And funds like that, we have a number of funds like that called sunsetting funds. And when the funds are established, the group may decide we would like for the entire amount to be used up in 10 years or in 20 years. but they also have a bit of a plan for how they want to do that. So it's going to be done in a very deliberate fashion, but they intend for the money to be pushed out into the community entirely within a fixed period of time. So those funds at the end of that period of time are closed and they cease to be. So that would not be something that would be included in an estate plan or a will.
The advisory group, in this case, I'm going to call it the Smoketown Community Advisors, just because we haven't given it a name. So the Smoketown Community Advisors would really have to make a lot of decisions on how this fund would be used with the Community Foundation of Louisville, helping them to make those decisions, but it would really be upon the responsibility of that group of Smoketown Community Advisors to kind of make the final decisions on how this fund could operate with CFL.
Absolutely. And we go through that with anyone that starts a fund. There's a certain number of decisions that need to be made for every fund. And we help you with each, with what the choices are and what we're capable of doing with each decision. And they can be the simple things from what are you going to name the fund to how do you want to invest it, or what do you want to have happen if the nonprofit you want to support ceases to exist. So there's not a large universe of decisions that have to be made, but the ones that do have to be made are very regular. We are used to doing this with people, and we can help guide the discussion and help the Smoketown group figure out what it is they would like to do.
All right. So you said that the Community Advice Fund is something pretty new, but I'm going to ask, who can actually receive grants from donor advised or community advised funds?
So donor advised funds and a community advised fund is really not a technical entity, but a community can use members of their community to be the advisory committee for a donor advised fund. So that's how we're envisioning this working. Grants from donor advised funds can be recommended to any nonprofit or otherwise tax-exempt organization that's in good standing with the IRS. Now, there's a directory of these organizations called GuideStar, which we use to make sure that we can make a grant to the named nonprofit that's been recommended. And this includes large nonprofits that everyone would know, like the Salvation Army or the American Heart Association or the Humane Society, but it would also have churches and schools and other tax-exempt organizations as well. The one thing to remember is that donor advised funds cannot make grants to individuals or to for-profit organizations. They are prohibited from making these types of grants.
So Jennifer, who prohibits it? Is it at a decision of the Community Foundation, or is it someone other than the Community Foundation who prohibits us being able to make grants to individuals or for-profits?
That's prohibited. It's in the IRS regulations concerning donor advised funds and community foundations. So it's really from IRS regulations.
I've been working with the Community Foundation. I've been employed by the Community Foundation for almost 3 years. And one thing that I did not know about a community foundation was that it is different from like a private foundation like James Graham Brown or the Humana Foundation. And that James Graham Brown and Humana Foundation, those types of foundations get their money that they give away from like one entity, right? But a community foundation, by law, we're different because we get our donations from many, many, many different people. And because our donations are coming from many different people, the IRS has different rules for how we are able to grant that money out. So one of those rules, I think, is concerning that we can only grant to nonprofit organizations.
Correct. And you've described it perfectly. Yes,
So what happens with the money if the advisors are unable to make a decision about how to make grants from the fund?
We regularly include in our fund agreements, and the fund agreement is the agreement, it's the document that tells how the fund is set up and how it's going to function. And we regularly include in those agreements contingency plans. So if a nonprofit that a donor chooses no longer exists, what would they like to have happen with that money? Would they like for there to be a substitute nonprofit? Or would they like for us to find some nonprofit that is doing basically the same work and would be very similar to the one that they originally chose? So what would happen if the advisory committee can't agree on where to make a grant? That would be something we would want to talk to the Smoketown committee about and how they would like to address that situation. And then we would put that in the fund agreement. There are lots of different options. They can choose a period of time after which a triggering period of time after which something would happen. Say, if they can't make a grant for 2 years, then we're going to do XYZ. And it could be there's going to be a predetermined nonprofit or nonprofits that they all decide on and say, if we can't decide for a couple of years, go ahead and use that available grant amount and send it to those nonprofits. Or maybe they'll decide they're going to defer to a single named advisor to make the final call. These are things that they can decide. We'll work with them to see what they prefer and then incorporate that in the fund agreement. We always want to know what the wishes are of the creator of the fund if certain contingencies happen. We would like for that all to be in the fund agreement. And that way everybody can read it and they can know how things are going to proceed and they can know what the guidelines are for the fund.
All right, well, next question. What happens with the money that's put in a donor advised or community advised fund? Does it draw interest or grow while it's in the fund?
So that's something that the Smoketown Advisory Committee would get to make some decisions on. The money would be invested and they would get to choose from one of 4 investment options. And these options do invest the money in the market. So there's the potential for growth and for interest. And the fund options range from funds that are more aggressive and they're going to experience larger gains and also larger losses to more conservative fund options that normally have lower returns, but they see smaller losses when the market is really volatile. The thing to remember when choosing an investment option, they want to think about how long the fund is going to be invested and what their tolerance for risk in the market is. So the longer a fund is going to be invested, typically a little more risk can be tolerated. If it's going to be a very short-term fund, if this fund is going to be exhausted within just a few years, they may want to opt for something more conservative. But that's something that we can continue to talk to them about, and our investment people can also talk to them in more detail about that.
Great, thank you. All right, next question. How can a donor be guaranteed that the money in a donor advised or community advised fund be used the way they intended?
Well, a gift to a donor advised fund is a completed charitable donation to the community foundation, just like a gift to any other public charity. The donors or the advisors to the funds that we have here, though, they retain advisory privileges. That lets them recommend grants from the fund to the nonprofits that they want to support. And normally, as long as the nonprofit is a 501c3 organization, which is an IRS designation, or they're an otherwise tax-exempt organization and they're in good standing with the IRS, the grant is made according to the recommendation. The recommendation is not binding on the foundation, however, and the foundation is actually required to have the final power to decline to make a grant that doesn't adhere to the applicable restrictions or policies. But that said, we exist to help people achieve their charitable goals, and we do everything we can to make that happen. So as long as the grant is recommended to a nonprofit that's on the GuideStar directory that we talked about earlier, and they're in good standing with the IRS, there's normally no problem with sending the grant to that organization.
The money in the donor advised fund insured like when you put it in a bank?
Well, no, that type of insurance is limited to banks and savings associations. We are a publicly supported nonprofit foundation, community foundation, and we're accredited through the national standards for U.S. community foundations. And we observe best practices to ensure that we are operationally and legally sound. We are the largest charitable foundation in Kentucky with over $500 million in assets and more than 1,800 individual component funds. And we've been stewarding funds since 1984, which is over 35 years.
What is the recommended amount of advisors for a donor advised or community advised fund?
Well, based on our experience with advised funds, we recommend an odd number of advisors, usually somewhere between 3 and 11 would be workable. But the number is really not as important as making sure there's adequate representation of all the interested parties in Smoketown in this situation. So while there's certainly a number of advisors at which the group is too big and it's going to be unwieldy and it'll be very difficult to get the functions that they're supposed to accomplish done, it's probably better to start from the perspective of being representative. And when you think about all the groups that need to be represented, you're probably going to naturally arrive at a number that will serve on the advisory committee. So rather than starting with, we have to pick 7 people, probably think more about what are the different factions of the neighborhood that should be represented here, and then who could represent them. That's probably going to be the better way to get to the ideal number of advisors for this fund.
Excellent point, which leads me to my next question is who's actually going to determine the advisors for this?
Well, that is an ongoing conversation, and the Community Foundation would work with the Smoketown residents to figure this out collaboratively. So we'll continue to have conversations and engage with them. Ideally, the group is going to be made up of people who live in Smoketown or work there or serve there in some capacity. The advisors can be named community members, or they can be people who are identified by their office or their position. For instance, the president of a neighborhood association, or the principal of the local school, or the pastor of the local church. We find this is often useful to help ensure that the representation from across the community continues over time. So when advisors step down from the advisory committee for whatever reason, they've served long enough or they're tired or whatever, the remaining advisors would have the ability to replace that advisor. And to make sure that it doesn't end up being a group of people who just all know each other very well, but stays representative across the community, they might want to consider having a mix of named individuals and also maybe of individuals that are identified by the position they hold in the community. And that way it'll stay broad over time. Yes, up till now is part of what we do. That's part of our day-to-day operations. Once funds are established, we do receive an administrative support fee, and that's on all of our donor advised funds. And we have a standard fee. The current fee structure right now, it's assessed on an annual rate, and it's equal to 1% of the fund balance on the first $1.5 million of the fund. Over that, between 1.5 million and 3 million of the balance, the fee we receive is 0.5%, and above 3 million, it's 0.2%. Now that supports these day-to-day operations that allow us to carry out our mission. We serve the donors that we have now, and we serve the donors that will be coming along in later generations. And we also serve our nonprofit community as well. We have trainings, we have capacity building grants, Give for Good. We are always looking for ways to connect nonprofits to donors. So our support fee supports all of that work. There is one other fee that does come with donor advised and other endowed funds, and we do not receive any of that fee, and that's an investment fee. It is 0.06%, and it's charged to the fund and covers the cost of our independent investment consultant, and we do not receive any portion of that fee.
Well, this is great. Ramona, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I was going to add, we have been working with the Preston and Finzer Street property since 2015. And to piggyback the fees that Jennifer has discussed, a lot of the work that was associated with trying to figure out how we could develop that property for community benefit was actually paid for through a donation from one of the donors. They created a fund to actually support the work of looking at how can we develop the Preston and Finzer Street property. So the monies from those funds were used to help to support a project manager to look at developing plans for a potential development project that we were unable to complete because of a lot of changes in the financial economy. But all of that was paid through a donation by one of the donors. So to move forward, that fee does make sense because we have to continue to operate. Even though we are a charitable foundation, we also are a business.
Thank you both for this wonderful information for the Smoketown residents. Now, is there a website or a phone number that they could use to gather more information if needed?
Well, yes, definitely. The place to go to give more information is smoketownfeedback.org. It's a website. It's smoketownfeedback.org. At that website, you'll see some frequently asked question documents, some more information about donor advised funds, and there is also a link for Smoketown residents and stakeholders to tell us which option that they prefer. So we would really like you to go on to smoketownfeedback.org and tell us what you think about those two options.